Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Every Arkansan podcast. I'm Drew Davis, and this week we've got our youngest guest ever. She is still just a teenager, but she is changing the lives of African orphans one at a time. This is one you don't want to miss. Well, Abby, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. We're so thankful you're here. Back when we started this, your name was one of the ones at the top of the list, and Kristen said, hey, she can't come until summer break because she's in college now.
Right.
So you got this thing started early. So let's start from the beginning. How old were you?
I was actually 14 years old, but I'm so excited to be here. I'm so grateful. I feel like so honored and so privileged, but it actually began when I was 13 years old. I'd always told my mom and dad, hey, I want to go to Africa. And I was so grateful that they didn't squash my dreams. And a lot of parents are nervous sending their kids overseas, but my parents were like, okay, if you want to go for it, which is so crazy. I hope as a parent one day I'll be like that. But I went at 13 years old, and honestly I could say I was zero help that trip. And it's because I really think that when you go to Africa, the poverty is a whole nother level. I'd been to Honduras, I'd seen that, but there was something about Africa that just freaked me out. Not freaked me out, but it was more it was what you see, I thought, in dreams and movies. The poverty is a whole nother level. But the one thing that stood out to me is that a lot of the kids didn't know what they looked like. And that's the one thing that I remember from that trip. And so I promised myself as I was leaving the country that I was going to come back the following summer and do something about that thing that I remembered. So it wasn't that I wanted to start something. It was really, I'd always wanted to go to Africa, and that's kind of where God started my journey,
So that means you've got to go back.
Right.
Because before this, you said you've been there 17 times now.
Yes, sir, which
and you're
is
20
crazy.
years old.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been there from the age of 13 to 7
Right.
years.
Mm-hmm. That's
at least twice a year.
It makes me feel old. I'm I've been doing this for 7 years. That's so crazy. But I'm only 20,
So that problem that you saw of kids just had never seen themselves, what'd you do about it?
Okay, so basically it was foreign to me because I walk by the mirror all the time and look at myself, and these kids, when I took a picture, they'd freak out. And so I decided to bring a mobile printer, and what I wanted to do was take the pictures of the kids and print them out as I'd done it, and then they could have a picture of themselves. For me as a 14-year-old, that seemed like an easy problem solution kind of thing. So I was naive though, because I didn't realize it took 8 hours to take all the kids' pictures. We were there and they were just lining up one after the other after the other. And so I remember I went home that night and I was sitting in the living room, and the lady who started the school came down, and she was sitting with me because I'm a night owl, definitely not a morning person. And I just asked her, what's your biggest need? And now, thinking about that, I've always been one to, ask the good questions, the hard questions. I'm always inquisitive. But, as a 14-year-old, usually your first question isn't, what's your biggest need? But she just looked at me and said sponsorship. Nothing more, nothing less, just sponsorship. So I remember going up to my room that night, and I was flipping through all the kids' pictures on my computer. And have you ever had that moment where your palms are sweaty and your heart starts racing, and God's trying to talk to you and get your attention? And that's kind of how I felt. And so Blue Door started basically under a mosquito net, just because God was prompting me to do something about it.
And so you took those pictures, you gave those pictures to those kids. What was that experience like for you when those kids were seeing their pictures for the first time?
I can say it's something I can't even put words to. When they looked at it, some started crying, some were jumping, some were laughing. And I went back 3 years later, and I was walking into a house, and the original picture that I took of them was framed in the child's house. That's how important it was to them. And I didn't realize that just a small thing as taking pictures would lead into something that it is today. And I kind of think that's how the Lord is. He's not going to show us the big plan. He's going to give us a small practical step. When we're faithful with the small one, then it goes to the next one and to the next one. It's how I've seen it work in my life.
And so Blue Door's name, where's it come from?
It actually comes from, I took all the kids' pictures against a Blue Door. So every year I go back and we take updated pictures of the kids now with the Blue Door. So all the doors in the school are blue, which is really fun.
Have they repainted the doors?
They have, yes, sir. Every time I go, they're like, okay, we'll get some fresh paint. We promise, which is really cool.
And so you took those pictures. She laid on your heart this sponsorship idea. So you come back home at the age of 14.
Yes.
And what happens?
I sat on the couch with my parents and I said, okay, Mom and Dad, I think I'm supposed to start a sponsorship program. God told me to do it. And like, imagine your child telling you that, you know. A lot of parents would be like, well, I don't know, like, you don't know what you're doing. But I remember they literally said, okay, well, like, if God's calling you to this, then, like, let's see what happens. And so once again, like, Blue Door is what it is today because they didn't squash my dream when I was that little. At 14 years old, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was cool. So then it just started by I posted the pictures on Facebook. That's the only thing I knew to do. And then God is so great that he kept bringing the perfect mentors and people that was like, oh, well, I can design a website for you, or, oh, come speak at this church. And so Blue Door became what it was just because people were like, okay, I can help you with this. This is my expertise. And so God was just bringing the people to help me because he knew I had no idea what I was doing.
And so what has Blue Door become now? From 14 to 20 or 13 to 20?
Yes.
So it's a stand on its own nonprofit.
Yes, sir.
And how many kids are y'all sponsoring now?
So we have 720 kids in our 2 schools, elementary and high school. So basically we're a sponsorship program. I always tell people our mission is just to share the stories. Our mission is to share stories of heartache and suffering from voiceless children with sponsors who can give their support to give these kids life-changing hope. And it's not a special formula. It's not a written document that's pages long. I feel like God really told me, as long as I open my mouth and share the story, his job is to move the hearts, and I don't have to do that. And so that's been like really freeing that like it's nothing I can do, like God's gonna do it all. He's just asking me to open my voice for these kids who can't do it for themselves.
And so tell me, I mean, you go there, you must be a celebrity. You're like the Oprah Winfrey of Arkansas, I guess.
Gosh, I don't know about that, you know.
But these kids, what difference does having a child sponsor do for these kids?
I would say for the kids, it gives them a sense of identity. Like if they're not in school, they're sitting at home and their neighbors are laughing at them because it shows that their parents don't have money. When they get to come, they're fed, they're taught, and I think the greatest thing is not only do I want to give them an education, but I also want to teach them who they are in the Lord, that they have a place here in society. Like God does have a plan for them, but even more so for the kid, it lifts the burden off the mom. Like the mom doesn't have to pay the school fees. We feed them lunch every day. Some of the kids even live with us at school, so not only are you helping the child, but you're restoring the hope in the mom as well, which has been so cool to watch.
Is it boys and girls, just girls?
Yes, so we actually have from 3 years old to 21. So we have boys and girls. So it starts from preschool all the way to seniors in high school. And hopefully one day college. We'll see. It's a vision. It's a vision. Yes.
You got here from the age of 13 to 725 kids. To, I mean, who knows? I mean,
right.
you can have
I mean,
the
the
Harvard
sky's
of
the
Africa.
limit with God, for real, though. You can never limit him. You never know what he's going to do.
So, with these kids, you've now gotten to see some of them 17 times. What's that like? Because I think for so many people, they take that once-in-a-lifetime mission trip.
Right.
I'm going to Africa, or I'm going to Germany, or I'm going wherever.
Yes.
And that's it. But for you, you've been going back multiple times a year for all these years. What's that difference been for you?
Okay, I would think the important thing is ever since I started, I said I want to be a constant for these kids. So many people come in and out of their lives, and so that's something I've always put at the forefront. But I've always told, people always tell me, like, how can you relate to the kids? How can you relate to the parents? Like, you've had a good upbringing in Arkansas. Like, you are in college now. How do you relate? And here's what I say. As a parent, like when you have a child, I've heard that like immediately you have the responsibility to feed them, to clothe them, to send them to school, and to teach them about Jesus. And in a way, I feel like I'm a mom to 720 kids. You know, like when I walk into school, like my love like flows into these kids, and I like see them as my own, because it's my job to find sponsors to feed, clothe, send them to school, and teach them about Jesus. And so I think that's why, like, since I do feel like their mom, that's why I like don't want to stop. Like there are so many times where it would be so easy just to be the regular college student or not have to do all these things and go to all these meetings, but like these kids are my heart, and like that's what keeps me up at night, because I think about Mary and Eric and little Trufina, and like I can't like do my day-to-day without thinking about them, you know, which has been super cool.
And I think you hit on a valid point here. You are a college student.
Yes, sir, I am.
I mean, you've managed to do all of this while still going to school, getting into college, doing all this.
Right.
talk about encouraging parents. Carmen must be very proud.
She is so proud, which is really sweet. But she's also been like my biggest help. Like, I didn't want to go to college like originally, but I realized I couldn't advocate and tell my kids in Kenya how important going to school was if I didn't take it seriously myself, because ultimately like I have to be the example. So that's been like really cool to like step into that. But also like Blue Door's a full-time job, but I'm also a full-time student. So my mom actually quit her job to stay at home and help me run Blue Door, which has been like, you know, so incredible. And like we have volunteers and a board, and like it's definitely not me. Like I might be the one speaking and talking, but there's so many people behind me who make it what it is today, because I can't do it all by myself.
So you're dreaming of a college for these kids. What else?
Yes.
What else are you looking at when you go there and you visit and you're saying, oh my goodness, I wish these kids had this opportunity? Or
I think college is definitely a big thing, just because like when I started this, I thought $40 a month was enough. But then you realize you have teacher salaries and bills and like all these things. But then also like once they finish high school, what's the next step look like? Like here we have like VOTEC and college to like launch us to really be prepared. And so I really want to prepare my kids, because here's what I dream of. I want the kids who come through our doors to change the next generation in Kenya. And I know that's like a huge dream and like a huge statement to make, but I truly believe that like when you invest in the one and then the next one and the next one, like they're the future for their country. And so I think that's what makes me excited about going back, because I realize every time we invest, that's gonna like have repercussions we might never know about, because it only takes one.
And so the people that line up and they say, okay, I'm going to be a sponsor, they can actually go and meet these children, right?
Yes, sir. I realized that I wanted to be a different sponsorship program. You have all these big sponsorships around the world, but I really wanted to feel like a family thing. So like, yes, like if you sponsor a child, we take trips in the summers all the time, and we're hoping to start even taking more trips throughout the year. But like you actually get to go meet your child, and then it's really cool because I always take the sponsors to go meet the families of the child in their home. And so like the interactions that I've seen from that is like incredible. Like moms literally like on the ground weeping at the feet of the sponsors because they're so grateful and things like that. But then also another fun thing we do is like in the summer, all the kids make crafts for their sponsors. And so we have a team that goes and does it with the kids, and then we bring them back. So sponsors get something in the mail, usually every other month or quarterly, whether it's like a little flower or a picture frame, basically what your kids would make like at Sunday school on church. And so just so like the sponsors know that the kids do really care about them, because the kids always tell me, I pray for my sponsor every night, that God would bless them for what they're doing, which is so precious, because $40 a month isn't a lot for us, but these kids are like, I can't believe you're sacrificing that much for me. So that's like humbling, like, whoa, you know what I'm saying? So that's been really cool.
So you're doing this your freshman year of college. What are all of your classmates thinking about this? Are they...
Yeah, I think it's been like really hard, just because I don't feel like I fit in. Like my heart is in Kenya, but I'm doing the day-to-day of college, and so like I don't tell a lot of people. Like if they ask, that's great, but I don't want to just be known as, oh, this girl who does the Africa thing. Basically, I'm just doing what God's called me to do, and like he calls everyone to something different, and mine might just be a more public thing, but I try to like not be like talk about it all the time. But it has left me super lonely, because since I have to be the example for the kids, I can't do a lot of things that regular college students do, nor do I have the desire to. So I think it's finding the balance that when God calls you to something, it's not easy, it's difficult, but you just have to learn how to navigate that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, it makes absolute sense. I mean, there's a lot of sacrifices.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of, just from me as a parent,
Right.
sacrificing time with family and different things like that. So
Yes,
just
sir.
lots of respect for trying to do it and go to college and
Thank you.
keep your head above water.
It's not perfect, I can tell you that.
Well, and that's one of the things that I love about ministry is that we will never reach perfection.
Yes.
Jesus is perfect. We're
Right.
never going to reach that, but we can pursue excellence.
Right.
We can do the best we can, and God shows up in amazing ways and
Absolutely.
makes the difference.
Yes, sir. And I think it's been super cool that like I'm not a special person, you're not a special person. God just is really asking for someone who said, okay, I'm willing. And I think that's like a day-to-day like commitment to myself, is that a lot of times I think about, oh, my friends are like getting engaged and talking about like moving and like how many kids they want. And like, honestly, I don't know what that looks like for myself, you know, because I think that eventually God's going to call me to move to Kenya full time. And so it's a day-to-day being like, okay, like I have to trust that his plan for my life is what he knows is best for me. And if that's moving to Africa and my life looking totally different from my sister's or the person next to me, like I have to be okay with that. But it's definitely like a constant battle of like my head and my heart kind of thing, you know? So it's an ongoing process.
Right. As long as you're chasing after what God's got for you, it all works out in the end.
Yes, sir.
So there's got to be a kid or two that just like, they're your kid. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, this is the kid that I'm sponsoring. Who is that for you there?
Okay, so there's 3 of them. Their names are Dorothy, Samuel, and Charlene. And it was my second trip to Kenya when I was 14. I remember they were like, okay, like we're going to go meet some families. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. So we're going, and I'm literally like holding on to iron sheets as I'm trying not to slip in the raw sewage I'm walking with, just to like get to this house. Like you can just picture like me just like trying to like not like fall on my face, because that would be so embarrassing. But I remember walking into this little bitty slum house, and the mom gave me a water jug to sit on, so I'm sitting on the water jug, and she starts to just tell me, who's like, I'm a complete stranger, her whole life story. How her husband had left her, and like now she's basically left to pick up the pieces with these 3 kids. And so then like her tears started like falling faster and faster, as you could tell she was like kind of embarrassed to tell me that every morning she leaves her 5, 3, and 1-year-old at the time in the home to care for themselves while she goes to look for work, because she doesn't have anyone to watch them during the day. And at that moment, I'll never forget, the littlest one started crying, and so, because they had like gotten in a fight or whatever. So I remember I got off the water jug and I sat on the dirt floor and just like held her baby. And as a 14-year-old, I shouldn't have related to her because we didn't have a lot in common. But I do think that at some times, like, God gives us his heart for a little bit. And at that moment, like, when she locked eyes with me, like, I saw her pain, and, like, I saw, like, the hurt that she was experiencing. And, like, I was, like, starting to feel it myself. And so I would say, like, that's the first time where I realized, like, how important sponsorship was. Because I, like, in that moment was, like, I've got to find sponsors for your kids. And so I remember going home that night, and I called my mom, and I was like, I promise I'll babysit and pay for this child, but like I need you to pay for the other 2. Like I can't do it on my own. And I remember calling her saying that, because those kids just like tugged on my heart, and that was like the first real experience where I was like in the day-to-day life of Kenya. Like I felt like for that minute, and like I was experiencing what she was experiencing in a way, and like I will never forget that moment, because I think Blue Door started because I had that experience.
And so now those kids are how old?
Now I don't know how old they are, just because it's so hard to keep up with everyone, but they've been in our school for 6 years, and so it's been so cool. Again, I feel like their mom, like I've watched them grow up. Like now the oldest is in 5th grade, and she's like talkative, and every time I come to school, they're the first ones who run up and hug me, you know. And it's been cool because I go visit their home every time I go to Kenya, and so now it's cool to see how the mom now has a stable job because her kids are in school. And so it's been cool to see like the life like back in her, because now she's smiling and she always comes to see me. And so like it's really cool that I've been able to like foster that relationship, which has been so great.
And so I guess the question is, for so many of these kids right now, they kind of graduate high school or whatever is there. What are they doing now? What's kind of their process now? Are there jobs in the community?
I think the hardest part is there's so many people in Kenya, and the jobs are so hard to find. And so that's why we're trying to figure out what the next step is for our kids. So a lot of them, we've been trying to put them in like VOTEC schools, and then they work at our school like partially, because it's been really cool to like see how they have the desire to pour back into the school that gave them so much. So that's been really cool. So like that's kind of what we're doing right now. But when you have 30 in a graduating class, like you can't it's hard to do each individual. So I think that's what we're really asking God for, like his provision, and like his question, like asking him questions about, okay, God, like what does this look like? Is this your timing? the kind of thing. Because like one thing I've learned over these years is like I don't want to move if the Lord doesn't step first, because so many times I've stepped first and then I've just crashed and burned, you know. So I think we've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, if you're not going before me, then I refuse to go, kind of thing. Which is trial and error for sure.
A lot of wisdom for a 20-year-old.
I don't know. It's all God. He's taught me so much. For sure.
So let's just kind of get down to the nuts and bolts. If someone wants to be a sponsor, where do they go?
Okay, so we actually have a website. So if you go to bluedoorsponsorship.org, we have a tab that says sponsor a child. And so I've put kids who are in our program who are up there, so you can just see their faces and read their stories. And then basically you just email me and say which child you want to sponsor, and the correspondence kind of starts from there.
Okay, and then on these missions trips and all that, is all that information available on the website as well?
Yes, as well. Like basically if you just email me, so my email is abbyf@bluedoorsponsorship.org. Basically just people are like, I want to go on a trip, and then we start talking and seeing where we go from there, how we can fit them into a trip and things like that, because I love taking people, like exposing people to the need over there is probably one of my favorite things. Because it's so great that like not only does God use us to help the kids, but the kids do so much for us. Like people have been like, the direction of my life was changed in Kenya because of this experience I have. So it's really cool to see how like God's not only working in the kids, but also in the hearts of the people who are going. So that's super cool.
And it's definitely done a number on you.
For sure. I can say that like sitting here in front of you, like because of what the Lord has chosen to do with me, like I'm a completely different person. Like when in middle school, like I was so horrible. I was almost sent off to boarding school because my parents like literally didn't know what to do with me, because I was like tearing my family apart. And so I remember it was an experience where I was like grounded in my room. There was nothing in my room because I was like, fine, take it. Like, I don't even care. Like, that was kind of like my attitude. And I remember I was sitting by my nightlight and my mom walked in and she just looked at me and she was like, Abby, Satan is fighting for your life, and what are you going to do about it? And I would like to say that things like changed immediately, but like I think that's where my story kind of like took a turn, when my mom was just bold enough to be like, do you understand like what's at stake, you know? So sitting in front of you today, like I have to say it's all because of God. Like none of this is like my own doing, because as you can see, my own doing was almost being sent off to boarding school. So I think that's been cool. But also like it's been hard. Like there's been so many people who are like critical of what I'm doing, or like you're too young, like you don't know what you're doing kind of thing. And so I think through all of this, like the verse I always like cling to is like 1 Timothy 4:12, that says, don't let anyone think less of you because you're young, but be an example in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, faith, and purity. And basically what that means to me is like, if God wants me to do something, he's going to give me the skills that I need. So like I shouldn't let my age be a factor, because if I did, look what wouldn't have happened, and like the lives that wouldn't have been touched, you know? So like that's been my verse that I just like cling to over and over again.
Just so you know, I'm 46. I've been doing this for a decade, and I look up to you. You've done an amazing job of just chasing after God, chasing after that dream that he laid in your heart. And I know that Kristen and those that are in this room over here that have tears in their eyes from some of this stuff, we're so grateful that you were obedient.
Thank you so much.
And we're so thankful you made the time to come and just hang out with us today.
For sure. I'm so grateful. I loved being able to come. It means a lot.
We just pray that your trip to Kenya is productive and you come back with a lot more pictures and
sir, for sure.
Change a few more lives.
I hope so. That's the goal. Yes, sir.
Hey, guys, I hope you really enjoyed Abby's story. And what really reaches me is no matter how young you are, no matter what skills you don't have, you can make a difference in someone else's life. I hope this story inspires you to go out there and chase something big.